catching up with an Army Soldier of the Year more than 3 decades after the accomplishment, his coming out story, and the military's history with LGBTQ plus policies. And standing up for equality in Texas, the new event featuring queer industry leaders and the message they're bringing to the Lone Star State. Each year, the U.S. Army names its Soldier of the Year. In 1992, Dr. Joe Zuniga was the sixth person to receive the honor. The next year, he used his platform to come out to the world. Our sister brand, The Advocate, shared his story then, and 30 years later, we are spotlighting the work done by Joe over the years and the progress and downfalls he sees that have been happening. Joe joins me now as the president and CEO of the International Association of Providers of AIDS Care. Hi, Joe. Thank you for being here with me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, I wonder if you would kind of go back to 1992 when you were a soldier and then, you're coming out. And I wonder, would you talk a little bit about the climate at the time? Because so many folks weren't there for it. I was, but
Sure. Well, 1992 was a pivotal moment for the gays in the military movement, largely because of a commitment that then presidential candidate Bill Clinton had made to repeal the ban on gays and lesbians in the military. So it made sense at a time when there was a tremendous amount of debate around whether gays and lesbians should serve openly in the military, that I would come out as the sixth U.S. Army Soldier of the Year, just to demonstrate the illogic and the irrationality of banning gay and lesbian service members who could serve with honor and distinction from serving in the military. The environment was tremendously difficult at the time, largely due to stigma related to sexual orientation. There was a tremendous amount of pushback from the military establishment for President Clinton to make the decision to remove the ban altogether. And what we wound up with was Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
hmm, yeah. Which of course became its own problem. And would you, looking back at Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and I've read your coming out speech, and in it you talk about how you were pretty much forced, if you wanted to be in the military, to live as a straight person, or to hide your authentic self. And also you had to endure homophobia from your military peers, and it was incredibly moving to read that. And I wonder, looking back at that now, would you talk a bit about how things have changed for the better, even though we know there are ramped up attacks? But would you just share a little bit about those changes and what those meant to you?
Sure. Well, Don't Ask, Don't Tell basically codified a policy of living a lie, of not being able to be your true self, and creating a double standard where, for example, a heterosexual service member could have a photo of his or her loved one or spouse on their desk, but those of us who were gay or lesbian could not. And in that regard, it made things even more difficult. And of course, those who were caught under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy were quickly dismissed from the military.
Mhm.
Things have changed since 2011, and I'm so happy that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was ultimately repealed, although it took so long to do so. Having said that, and although we do have open service now, there is still a tremendous amount of stigma in the military in relation to serving openly. And I guess tied to my work is just a simple fact that about less than 20% of at-risk service members are accessing HIV pre-exposure prophylaxis, for example, which is a medicine that HIV negative individuals take to prevent the acquisition of HIV. And when asked why, the majority of the service members indicate a discomfort in speaking to their primary care provider, military primary care provider, about their sex life or sexuality. That is true not just within the medical system and the military, but across the board, a continuing stigma, persistent stigma that is affecting the lives of many service members.
Right, and commonly known as PrEP. We would
Yes,
call it.
correct.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah, that's incredibly difficult to hear and dangerous. What do you see that needs to happen at this point for that to change? Is there a path forward for more acceptance in the military, especially given up ramped up anti-LGBTQ plus legislation all over the country?
I think there is obviously people coming out and more military service members being exposed to LGBT people is critical to creating an environment of acceptance. And so, in that regard, I've seen great strides being made, including with respect to sensitization training that is now required in basic training and all parts of military training. That's important. But so too is continued military leadership from the very top. And there, thankfully, we have a commander in chief who totally gets the importance of being inclusive. In fact, his championing of repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell was extremely important for President Obama to sign the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell back in 2011.
You mentioned earlier this idea of don't ask, don't tell, and it codified living a lie. And I can't help but think of the Don't Say Gay bill in your state of Florida and what that possibly could do to teachers. Because, I'm thinking about heterosexual couples, a teacher and a heterosexual couple having a picture of their family, and then a possible, gay teacher or lesbian teacher or whomever, someone in a same sex relationship possibly can't put a photo of their partner up. Would you talk a little bit about the through line from then to now and what we're seeing in this anti-LGBTQ legislation?
I wish I could say I had never predicted that this might happen. And in many respects, I think that this is a red flag for our community not to rest on our laurels and become complacent. Just because we managed to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell and achieve gay marriage equality does not mean that we're in a safe space. And very obviously, we're seeing that in legislation being proposed across the country, including here in Florida. It gets much worse than Don't Say Gay legislation. Um, just last week, several bills were introduced in the Florida House and Senate, including a bill that would prohibit me from flying a gay flag in my HOA or homeowners association residential neighborhood. That's the type of retribution, I guess, we are seeing as a community. And it does really require for all of us, not just the national organizations or even state-based equality organizations, but every single LGBT person to advocate, to do what it takes to get the word out about how odious these pieces of legislation are, which then get codified into law and supported by right-wing leaning courts.
Thank you very much for this conversation, Dr. Joe Zuniga, and thank you for all of the work and the activism that you've done. I mean, truly a pioneer for so many. So I appreciate your being here. A one-of-a-kind LGBTQ plus business conference and entertainment festival is preparing for a huge launch this year in Dallas, Texas. Unleashed LGBTQ will be the first festival of its kind, and Equal Pride is a proud media sponsor. The goal is to bring together thought leaders in the community to tackle a variety of topics. Among the featured guests and speakers are Queer Eye host Anthony Porowski, Shangela from Drag Race, India Moore from Pose, former Pennsylvania State Representative Brian Sims, Out 100 honoree Dr. Carlton Thomas, and Kelly Ann Wingett. Unleashed LGBTQ runs from September 22nd to 24th. Tickets are on sale now at unleashedlgbtq.com. March is Women's History Month, and today we're honoring the life and work of poet and activist Alice Dunbar-Nelson. Alice Dunbar-Nelson often addressed gender, race, and class in her work. She was born with a mix of African, Anglo, and Native American ancestry. She's considered to be one of the few women who were African American diarists of the early 20th century. Her work as a writer continued with the first newspaper created by and for African American women called The Women's Era. Dunbar-Nelson was politically active and organized for the women's suffrage movement in the mid-Atlantic states. Thank you for joining me on this Advocate today. We are advocating for all with our content and coverage. Visit the Advocate channel wherever you stream for more interviews and headlines. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. I'll see you next time.